Hey everyone, I wanted to chat about chapters 1044 and 45 of One Piece, and I thought I'd just do them both together before 1046 comes out because there's no break this week, which is fantastic. A lot of things happened and there's a lot to talk about, but I kind of want to do slightly shorter form content so that I can then go into other videos at other times to discuss things a little bit deeper. So I just want to touch on a few things. The first thing being the setup is slightly different now. I constantly change my desk around. I always move things in my space around no matter where I am. That's just one of the things I do. One of the things I'm not liking is how invasive my mic is right now, but I'm not really sure where else to put it. So we'll put that to the side for now and let's just talk about the chapters. Something that we've had in the One Piece community for a long, long time is the discussion of Joy Boy and Luffy and the connection between the two, and Zunisha came up and it was somewhat understood beforehand that there was a connection to Joy Boy, but now it's been confirmed recently, which is great. But a lot of things got cleared up here, which is fantastic, and it's great that the story has taken such a turn because Oda does like to do little twists in the story where you get deeper understanding of a character or a situation later that kind of flips how you view it. It changes your perspective. And I think that's a very important thing that has happened in One Piece is with the confirmation of what happened in 1044 and further what's happening in 1045, I suppose, we got confirmation of a lot of things that changed how we see One Piece entirely, which I think is fantastic. A lot of people seem to have a lot of varying opinions on this, and that's fine. It's good to have different opinions. It's good to have discussions and things like that to get deeper into these. So I absolutely love this. I think it's a great change for Oda to have made. I think it changes a lot. I recently started rewatching the series with someone, and it's their first time watching it, and who knows how many times I've watched it in bits and pieces, but I'm going all the way through from the beginning again, which is phenomenal. I really love One Piece, as you can probably tell, but it's just so different now with this new perspective that we have and this understanding that the devil fruit that we've known since right at the beginning is actually not exactly what it seems. And that was very cool because I even said in this one episode of a podcast I recorded with a friend, it's 2 hours long, so I've been putting off, doing anything with it. But we did touch on a few very interesting points, and I believe I said this here, or I believe I said it there as well. Luffy's devil fruit is incredibly weird. The fact that it changes just his body into rubber and it doesn't allow him to generate rubber, control rubber, turn other things into rubber, seems very weird for a paramecia fruit called the gum gum fruit. That just seemed very odd to me, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what it actually meant. So a lot of theories were going around recently about mythical zone devil fruits, and I wasn't really sold on the idea of mythical zone devil fruits for the main character. It seemed a bit weird. I did think we would get some kind of huge change that would change the way we looked at things, but one of the things I wasn't entirely sold on was the Sun Wukong idea. I thought it was very cool. I thought there was a lot of setup for it. I thought there was a lot of things that would have made it retroactively very interesting, but I just didn't really like it as the direction that we would be going. Not that I had anything that was like, more viable than that necessarily. I kind of like the idea of awakening to the rubber world idea that was spoken about before, which does seem to be a thing that we've got, which may mean that Onigashima bouncing could still very well be a thing. I think it would work very well with the wackiness, but we'll get into all of that just now. I like that we got a new perspective on it all, and I like that we went this very interesting route that we did with it, with this most ridiculous power in the world, because I think it's a very fitting thing for Luffy to fight as freely as he can, or as freely as he wants to, rather, because that's literally what Luffy is about. That is his character in a nutshell. That's always how he's been using his devil fruit, and just how he gets out of fights, and he's very clever and on his feet, and he likes to be very inventive with his powers and learn from other people. So I think it was fantastic the way that Oda handled it. But let's get into slightly more specific things of the chapter. We're going to just run on through this because I don't want this to be a 2 hour long video. I do want it to be out before the next chapter comes out, so let's get into it. So a few of the interesting things that I picked up on in chapter 1044 would be, not everyone seems to be able to hear the drums of liberation or Luffy's voice. A lot of the strong characters, Hyo and Law and Kid, and a lot of these people did pick up on it, and we saw that they picked up on it. But Marco had to kind of tell Tama and Nami that he's still alive. They if they could hear it, would know that he's still alive, or I guess they don't really know what they'd be hearing if they could hear it. So I just found that a little bit odd, but it just seems to be connected to observation haki and being of a certain strength, which is why the new generation pirates and Hyo, who is, a Ryuo master and a really old Yakuza, it makes a lot of sense that he'd be able to hear it, Marco, obviously, and then some of the other weaker people wouldn't hear it. So I'm assuming it's just tied to haki. I'm assuming it's tied to observation, and people with strong observation will be able to hear it. And people at a much higher spec observation, like Roger and Luffy, would be able to hear the voice of all things because it's kind of the logical extent of that power in a certain sense. So I think that all that confusion that we had with before and hearing voices is not that Law is necessarily able to hear the voices of all things, but he's got strong observation haki. But we'll see about that, and I think Law would be a good candidate for it, but I think he's just really good at observation. It might just be one of his things. So something from one of my previous reviews that I was a little bit surprised at was Kaido doesn't seem all that phased about what's going on, which is a little bit interesting considering how invested he is in Joy Boy and thinking that Luffy could have been Joy Boy, and then, oh no, he couldn't. And then he killed him, and then this massive power probably killed him, and then this massive power is coming from the ceiling above him that he just came down from, where he left only Mask Guy and Luffy. So I'm assuming that it wouldn't be Mask Guy, who is absolutely dead, by the way. I think Oda was just very okay with killing him before he even found out his name, which is, it happened. So I thought Kaido would have had more of a reaction to this. I thought he would have been more in the loop about this. I thought that he might have gone, oh, Joy Boy's finally awakened or something like that. But we didn't really seem to get that. He was just stunned by what was going on above him. Pretty sure he's sober now. I think the moment with killing Luffy sobered him up a lot. And now he's just back to regular old Kaido, who's just going to oppress people because he's sad, which just seems to be the kind of guy he is these days. It's a bit odd. Now, if you haven't read chapter 1044 or 1045, this is your warning now to get out, because it was absolutely fantastic to read 1044 without being spoiled. I don't know how I managed it because I got it really late on the day that it came out. But so this is your warning for spoilers for 1044 and 1045 of One Piece. I'm amazed that Gear 5 is here. It's fantastic. We kind of knew it was coming, or we kind of thought Awakening and Gear 5, they're going to be the same thing, but it's here. The thing that we've talked about for such a long time and speculated for is here. Were we right in our suspicions? Kind of. Were we wrong in a lot of ways? Absolutely, because it's Oda. But he can make other things rubber now. Not Oda, Luffy, unless Oda can do that, I don't know. But Luffy does have the whole rubber world thing that a lot of people theorized. I was never crazy about the name, maybe that's what he'll call it, but he can make other objects rubbery. And in 1044, an amazing thing happened where Luffy bounced back a borrow breath by stretching the ground, which says a lot about it, because if he stretched the ground and it retained its properties of being, the roof of Onigashima, the ceiling of Onigashima, it would have just blasted straight through. But the fact that Luffy grabbed it, stretched it, and ricocheted a borrow breath back is kind of insane. It's really, really cool. And one of the reasons that I thought it would be a good idea to do these together is we get a bit more of an expansion on how Gear 5 is used. It was pretty well showcased in 1044, but we got a lot more meat to it in 1045, which was fantastic. It seems that Luffy can just kind of make anything rubber, which is great. It's fantastic. He's more rubbery in himself. He can stretch out and he can gigantify his limbs. He seems to be using some form of Gear 4-esque techniques in Gear 5 without the use of his haki, but he is using his haki, his armors, and his Haoshoku no haki, confirmed by Kaido, because he's the one who's getting punched by him, so he probably knows. And it's just amazing that Luffy can turn the ground around him rubber, or his enemy rubber, or himself. He can just make himself more elastic, or maybe in Gear 5 he just is generally more elastic. I think it's incredible what Oda has done with it and how he's flipped the story. I thought it was very strange because I thought we would get something like the resin fruit, which would explain everything that we've had in these past almost 25 years to not be the rubber fruit, but be similar to it enough that he could just pull the rug out from under us. But Oda seemed to go for more of a, hey, here's all the other important stuff that's happening, and it also happens to give you the properties of rubber. Now, when you consider the freedom that it allows you and the intuitiveness or the inventiveness of your attacks due to this, it does make a lot of sense. You kind of need the rubber body to be wacky and goofy and do all these unusual things, which is what Luffy has done throughout the whole story. But we always assumed that's just because he was wacky and he had the gum gum fruit. But it's in fact a little bit more complicated, where he has the human fruit and has inherited this will, or eaten this will, I suppose, kind of weird, of Joy Boy or of the Sun God Nika, who are likely just the same thing. So anyone who awakens this particular fruit is just Joy Boy. So it is kind of a title in that way, I'm guessing, but it might have just been the name of the previous guy who awakened this devil fruit. So while I kind of thought it would be resin or silicone or something like that, although silicone is, as far as I know, man-made, I thought it would be something like similar to rubber that would explain all of those things, but it seems we just kind of got a story convenient power, or a story fitting power rather, that also happens to turn you into rubber, which I don't really have anything against it. It went a slightly different direction that I thought it would. This microphone is really starting to get in my way, literally. But I think it was pretty good. I thought it was a very interesting way of revealing it and flipping everything that we knew for these past 25 years. I at first thought the weird devil fruit the Gorosei were talking about might have been Robin's or something like that, but the story beats seemed to point to Luffy, which is kind of ultimately what a lot of people ended up agreeing with, because, and ultimately for the right reason, because it is what Oda was leading us towards. It wasn't a misdirect for Zunisha like a lot of people believed. It was just in fact the setup continuing on from what fake Rob Lucci, what was his name? Who's who? Whose name we don't know yet either. Hope he doesn't die before we find it out, Oda. But I think it was a very interesting direction to take. I don't really have any problems with it. I very much enjoy some of the interesting things that are going to come from this, and some of the other interesting things in the story that we can draw from this. One being, we now have 2 human fruit eaters on the crew. That's wild. I always thought Chopper's fruit was so unique, and it's very cool that a reindeer ate the human fruit, and that's why gains more sentience and intelligence and things like that. Not more sentience, but you know what I mean. And there was the whole question with the Buddha thing, and what happens if a human eats the Hito no Mi, and Oda kind of dodged that one, or said they'd become enlightened or something like that. I should definitely check on that, because that's going to have more relevance now, and that's what I love about this, is it recontextualizes the whole story that he's written. And I do believe this was very early planned. A lot of things lead me to believe that. I don't think it's really, I don't think it was contrived, and I don't think it was something that he thought back on and then changed. I think a lot of this is concrete from the beginning, and part of the message Oda was going for, and part of the intention he had in writing One Piece, and setting all of those things up to be flipped over retroactively, which is one of my favorite things about the story. So we should really start predicting it more from Oda, or looking out for it more, or at least I should, because it does happen a lot, and it's one of my favorite things about it. So let's talk about the wackiness that we have in One Piece, and that's not a new concept, really. The same way that if you watch JoJo's, or JoJo's Out of Context, even for those of you who haven't watched JoJo's, just go and watch JoJo's Out of Context, and then go watch all of JoJo's. That's your homework for this week. And it's a weird anime manga. It's wacky and wild and crazy, and so hard to explain to someone who doesn't have the context, but it's one of the appealing things about it. And the same thing can be said about One Piece, the way that Luffy is very endearing and also very silly and wacky and crazy. That's the kind of character he is. And from taking literal bites out of his opponents to all the other weird and frankly stupid things he does, it's part of his character, and it's part of why we love him so much. Maybe you don't. I think it's one of his best aspects. And that's exactly what we got here. We just got more of that here. Luffy's Devil Fruit has allowed him throughout the entire story to do all of these weird and wonderful things that defy our expectations, and defy the expectations of the people in the world. Like when he got shocked by Enel and it did nothing, and everyone was amazed by that. And then he, followed up with that daze technique and the octopus technique and the fireworks technique. He's a very inventive character who uses his strange devil fruit ability to find the weird solutions to problems that he encounters that most of the people don't have access to. The same way that a JoJo's villain will set up a contrived situation that a JoJo's main character or leading character or whatever will then find that one particular thing about themselves that helps them get out of the situation. And it's fantastic. And that's exactly what Luffy is doing here. The fact that he can pop his eyes out and make other people pop his eyes out around him by watching the weird things he does. I'm not entirely sure if that's part of the devil fruit or just part of the writing, which is exactly what Oda's going for. He's blurring that line between the people in the story and us as readers seeing this weird and wonderful thing that Luffy's doing that just makes you stop in awe at it. And this is one of the chapters that I took a lot of time to read, and I read it a few times as well. But even compared to last week, where I stopped a lot to just really try and take things in and, come to terms with the surreal experience of seeing Gear 5 and seeing the Awakening and seeing Luffy stand on par with Kaido, if not be a little bit stronger than him at this point. You just have to drink it all in. And this chapter 1045 was specifically good at that, because every time I saw Luffy doing something, I had to stop and really take it in, because I wasn't really sure what I was seeing. Particularly when it comes to those two moments, those two punches, the one right at the end of 1045 where he goes through Kaido and it kind of looks like he's just stretching Kaido's face back out, but you can still see his hand. So we'll see for the anime. That's one of the things that anime is good for, is really explaining what's going on there. And when Luffy reached through Kaido's eyes to grab his nose and pull himself out, that was, first of all, really difficult to look at, because, oh my god, eyes, Oda, eyes. But how does that work? Does he just make the eyes rubbery and stretch them out, or does he actually go through the eyes? I'm assuming it's the former rather than the latter, because, Kaido can still see and still has a face. But it's interesting because it's wacky and it's crazy, and it's Luffy doing what he's always done to a higher degree, and doing what he's always done to make us laugh and to progress through this harsh pirate world and the crazy, and I'm not going to say all those words that I've just used 6 times over, but the unusual way that he does things and the endearing way that he does these strange things. And all the way down to finally using giant Luffy techniques, which is something that I've thought he could do for a while, because he was partially inflating. I assumed, well, why not just go all the way? He was probably just limited by his Devil Fruits abilities at the time, which now he's not. So that answers that question. But he used an Emperor of the Sea as a skipping rope, which is just one of my favorite things in the whole story. Yes, Zoro is the best character. We all know this. We don't even have to have that debate. Luffy's a very close second. But Luffy using Kaido as a jump rope is just one of the best things, and it is what I love him for so much. I don't think it detracts anything from the story. In fact, I think it adds a lot more to the story, that it's just this goofy pirate manga, this goofy pirate comic that a lot of people are calling it. That's exactly what it is. Yes, it has more in-depth and harsher tones and stories and things that we allude to that aren't really in the limelight but are still important to the story. But in and of itself and at its core, it is a goofy pirate manga. That is what Oda is doing here. He's been doing it for almost 25 years. We're right about coming to that 25 year now. But that's exactly what he's doing. And he's taken it to the next level, because Luffy has reached the next level. I thought these were some of the best chapters that we've ever gotten out of One Piece. There's a lot of things that I still wanted to go into. I didn't even mention Hiyori, and Odin is one of my favorite characters out of One Piece, so I'll probably do a whole nother video about that. But I just wanted to scratch the surface of all of this and just kind of broadly talk about how amazing One Piece is right now. And I encourage pretty much everyone I meet to catch up to One Piece, even if you're not really into One Piece particularly or manga in general. It's a great thing to try. I like anime and manga in general and a lot of, nerdy stuff like that, I suppose, but I think it's a great medium. But even if you don't like it as a medium, I think One Piece is a particularly special case because of what Oda is doing with it and the boundaries that he's pushing and even breaking with this, and the incredible story and compelling characters that he's got here throughout all of this crazy, absurd, stretchy kid in a straw hat story that he's concocting. I think it's wonderful, and I will probably have to release a couple more videos over the next couple of days and after the next chapters come out to kind of delve into these things with a bit more clarity. But we will see how that goes. I'm probably going to start wrapping this up here. Before I go, though, I do want to mention I've been listening to a couple of other content creators, a couple of other podcasts, because if it's got a video, it's not really a podcast. That's not the place for it. But anyway, I've been listening to a whole bunch of other opinions about this, and some people have been talking about how long the fight is going to go, and I think I should just talk about that now as well. Not really to take Oda at face value when he says stuff like, let's wrap this up, through Luffy or anything like that, because we've heard a couple of things like that and we're still going. I don't think we've got a whole lot left of this fight. Both combatants are really beaten. They've been at this for a long time. The raid has been going on for literally years at this point for us. And I don't think we've got that much longer to go. I think Wano's going to be a bit longer. We've got a lot of things to wrap up, a lot of things to kind of clarify. But in terms of the fight between Luffy and Kaido, I wouldn't call it more than a couple chapters. We've got the flashbacks to get through, probably a Luffy flashback as well as a Kaido flashback, given what we've seen with Sanji and, I guess we had Zoro's very recently. 1033 was a fantastic one. I think we're going to get a lot more depth out of Luffy. Obviously, we're going to get more out of Kaido because we need the villain flashback. I think the fight is going to wrap up, let's call it the next 4 to 5 chapters. Call it 5 chapters to be safe. I don't even think we'll see that. I don't think we can see 5 whole chapters of Gear 5. Oh, maybe it will be 5 chapters of Gear 5 fighting. That would be very cool. Including these two, it would be 3 more. I think that seems about right because Luffy's already gone through a stage of powering down and then powering back up through sheer willpower, which isn't like always a stage in them, but I'm pretty sure we've seen it before. And I think it's fantastic that he uses the inspiration of his friends and the ones who have died as well to pump him back up and get back into the fight. I think it's phenomenal. But I really don't see the fight going on for much longer than it has. It's really reaching the climax, as we saw in the color spread. Well, we've seen that like 3 weeks in a row, but we really are at the peak of this fight. We're at the peak of Luffy, the peak of One Piece, the peak of the Wano arc and the raid on Onigashima and the Four Emperors saga. This is really the biggest we've seen One Piece get. And it's not my favorite chapters. It's really up there. These few here are not my favorite, but they are really, really, really on the cusp of it. 1033 is probably still my best. 1030 something else around there was really good. Zoro's obviously better than Luffy. It's taken me a while to get there, but I'm rambling. We are really at a phenomenal point in One Piece. It is a great time to be a fan of One Piece. It's a great time to be in the community of One Piece, hearing different thoughts and ideas and theories, of which, if you have any, please let me know. Drop them in the comments. I think we really are at the point where we're at peak One Piece and peak Luffy, and Luffy has a great footing in this fight. He was getting beaten down by Kaido, even when he had help of the other new generation and Zoro being there. He was getting beaten down. He got beat down in Curry, he got beat down on the roof, he got beat off the roof. That sounds weird, but it's true. And then he's come back, and now he's really finally at the time where he is actually beating Kaido in a lot of senses. Kaido tries to eat him. Well, he just expands, grabs out through his eyes, and escapes. No problem. He gets hit by the Kanabo. It stretches his face. He feels it. Doesn't really get phased by it. He gets squished down. He uses it to his advantage to rocket off and get a brand new technique that I don't think we got a name of, that I'd love to get a name of, where he punches straight through Kaido's face. Instead of trying to make a bit of leeway here and there, Luffy is actively making great leeway in this fight. He is making great progress here, and I think it's fantastic. I think it's genuinely one of the best fights we've seen in One Piece. I think it's some of the best chapters we've seen in One Piece, and I'm excited to see where we go in 1046. 1046, say it with more conviction. 1046. And I will release a couple more videos probably after that when we've got a little bit more of this fight and a little bit more of what we're doing. And then I'll start to delve into some of these other questions that I've written down and some of these other things that are going through my head. So until then, take it easy. Cheers.